Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gav, the Master974 back again today, and welcome to another Valve source code tutorial follow-up video, one that I've been sitting on for way too long at this point in time, and I'm sorry for that. But today's follow-up is going to be regarding burst fire weapons in Source 2013. Now the thing is, I don't actually have anything to follow up on in regards to the burst fire weapon functionality in Source 2013 single player mods. However, when I did my video about this, there were a couple people in the comments who suggested that there are actually problems with burst fire weapons in Source 2013 multiplayer mods. So basically what happens is, if you try to add a burst fire weapon and try to use the burst fire functionality in Source 2013 multiplayer, then it would look like the first bullet fires perfectly fine, but when the second bullet fires, the game crashes. And if you trace back where the game crashes, then you'll find yourself in a file called player-lag-compensation.cpp, and you're inside of the start lag compensation function. And if you consult the call stack, I think it's just the very previous function call, it takes you to hl2mp player.cpp, and you'll be inside of the fire bullets function, which calls start lag compensation. And the reason why the game crashes is because of the cuser cmd input of this arrow get current command being null. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking upon hearing this. Well, that's because you used the easy solution, which was to do the Source 2013 single player version of adding a weapon, which is to stub the weapon class on the client, and that is just not going to be a Source 2013 multiplayer friendly version of adding new weapons. But I can assure you, even if you did make changes to the burst fire code to make it work for Source 2013 multiplayer mods, the crash will still happen. But I'm going to be outlining some basic changes that you could make to the burst fire code to actually make it work more like a multiplayer version of a weapon would. So basically what I'm going to be doing is using the burst fire class CHL select fire machine gun from my Valve source code tutorials code, and make the following changes to it. So what you'd want to do inside of weapon hl2mp base machine gun.h is a bit of a mouthful, I know, but above the class declaration for the multiplayer version of the burst fire weapon class, what you want to do is add something like hashtag ifdef client underscore DLL, then hashtag define CHL2mp select fire machine gun, C underscore HL2MP select fire machine gun, then hashtag endif, and then you want to change CHL select fire machine gun to CHL2MP select fire machine gun, and also apply the changes in the declare class lines and the constructor. And then you also want to make the base class for CHL2MP select fire machine gun a CHL2MP machine gun. And then instead of a declare server class, you actually want to replace that with a declare network class and declare predictable. And then you can also get rid of the weapon range attack 1 and 2 condition functions because I don't think you need to use them. And then you want to go to weapon hl2mp base machine gun.cpp, and then you can make these changes. So in the primary attack function for CHL2mp machine gun, below the CHL2mp player *PHL2mp player line, you want to add the following. So you want to create a vector called vec_spread, which equals PHL2mp player arrow get attack spread of this. Then create a float called rand_float, which equals vec_spread.x. And then create a vector called spread to use, which equals a shared random vector of, and then in speech marks whatever you want, I choose to say spread eagle, then minimum value 0, maximum value rand_float, and you can pass through a seed to add a bit of variety to the spread, so I choose to add a seed of random int of 0 and get max clip 1 as you'll see in the video, and that is of course assuming you're using clip 1 and not like clip 2 for some reason. But yeah, there is one minor follow-up here that does apply to Source 2013 single-player mods, is that I'm creating a randomized vector from 0 to this rand_float value, instead of going from minus rand_float to positive rand_float. And the reason why is if you try to use a random vector which has a negative value, then you'll actually end up seeing data table warnings in the console when firing any sort of machine gun, and that is because of the bullet temporary entities and specifically m_fl spread having a minimum expected value of 0, so having a negative value causes these warnings to happen, which is something that you don't want. So I think that having the minimum value be 0 doesn't actually change things all that much, especially for the single player code as well. So I think that's what's going on. Don't quote me on that. This already has a lot of issues as is, so I'm just going to continue. So you can implement the burst fire class like this. So you actually have to remove the implement server class st and end send table lines if you're copying and pasting the code, like I said earlier. But you want to add implement network class alias of hl2mp select fire machine gun, dt_hl2mp select fire machine gun, and then begin network table of chl2mp select fire machine gun, dt_hl2mp select fire machine gun, and then end the network table. And then begin prediction data of chl2mp select fire machine gun, and then end the prediction data. And then basically change the CHL select fire machine gun to CHL2MP select fire machine gun in the data desk. And one thing that you're going to need to do is for the define function of burst thing, you're going to need to contain that within a hashtag ifdefgame_DLL statement or a hashtag ifndef of client DLL. Basically, if you try to have the define function macro run on the client, you're going to get a compilation error. So you can only do that on the server, unfortunately. And so lastly, in the primary attack function for CHL2MP select fire machine gun, for the set think line, you actually want to contain that in either a hashtag ifdefGameDLL statement or a hashtag ifndef client DLL statement. That way you only end up calling the think function on the server side and not the client side. Now, as I said earlier, even if you make these changes, the bare basic changes that I've outlined, you still end up getting the game crash when trying to fire the burst fire weapon. Now, honestly, I don't think I have an ideal solution to this issue, but there is a way that you can stop the crash from happening. And of all people I need to thank for this, I do need to give a thank you to Waddles for pointing out this solution, as obvious as it's going to sound. But basically what you need to do is go to hl2mpplayer.cpp, inside of the fire bullets function, and above the lag compensation line, you just simply want to add if cmd. And that's it. Basically what you're doing is checking to see if the cuser command is valid in the first place, and if it is, then you begin lag compensation, and if it isn't, then you don't run that code that crashes the game. And there you go, you can fire burst fire weapons now, and the game won't crash. Now, as I said, I don't think this is an ideal fix by any means. I think that there needs to be a way to stop the cuser cmd pointer from being set to null once the first bullet of the burst is fired, or there needs to be a way to preserve the last cuser cmd and use that if the current pointer is null for some reason. Now, there is a function called getLastUserCommand, but that returns a const cuser cmd and not a cuser cmd, so that causes some issues if you try to use that. And I don't know how you could actually go about using that in any meaningful way. And any ideas about how to actually get this sort of burst fire stuff working properly would be greatly appreciated. Now, of course, there's been some experimentation that I've done as well, which is kind of why I've delayed this video, and I apologise for that, but for some reason I don't know if this stuff is strictly necessary to do, so you can let me know about this as well if you want to. But one thing I don't know if you need to do is to turn the burst size and fire mode integers to CNetwork vars. Then of course integrate those into the network table for CHL2MP select fire machine gun, and or add them to the begin prediction data section, which I don't even know if that's something you need to do. Or even taking the randomized spread vector that I created for the CHL2MP machine gun code and then turning that into a CNetwork vector, trying to create the randomized vector on the server but then send it over to the client without the client creating a new randomized vector and stuff to that effect. Again, I don't really have any sort of ideal fix for this. If you have any suggestions or solutions or just want to point stuff out to me in the comments, then please do so. And again, I really do apologise for delaying this video as much as I have. It's probably not going to be a very long video, all things considered, but this is the one of Valve source code tutorial follow-up videos that I do want to try and keep short and sweet because I really don't have that much to follow up on. But as always, take care out there, peace out, see you later, have a great day. Hopefully this helps you out in some way, and see you for the next video.